These are the 3.4 notes for PreCalc. We're going to be talking about angles and their measure today. The first thing we're going to talk about is degrees, which you are probably familiar with from geometry. We have these two circles here. The first one on the left, we're going to start with 0 degrees, and we're just going to label the major points here. You start with 0 and we work around the circle like this, 90 degrees. Notice that 90-degree angle. All the way around to 180 degrees, representing a straight line. Keep going to 270 degrees. And all the way back to the beginning, which we also call 360 degrees. All the way around the circle, 360 degrees. Now, if we take that same circle and we work the opposite direction, this is when you have the negative degrees. So this first one would be negative 90. Notice it's still a 90-degree angle, but you went the opposite direction. Continue on to get 180 degrees negative. Keep moving to negative 270 degrees. And all the way around to negative 360 degrees. So notice that 270 degrees is the same as negative 90 degrees. All right, the next thing we're going to talk about is something called radians. So what are radians? Radians are a different way of measuring angles of a circle. So just like with feet and inches, you could also use meters and centimeters. We can use degrees as well as radians. So what is a radian? A radian, we all know this right here, this red part, is the radius. Those are very close. So a radius is from the center out, and a radian is if you took that one radius and wrapped it around the circle. One radius around the circle. A radian is one radius around the circle. So I'm going to take the length of this red part right here, and I'm just going to approximate how far it would be if it wrapped around the circle. I think it lands about here. So this blue part here, that's the equivalent of 1 radian. And I'm going to do that same thing again. I'm going to just approximate it. I think it goes to about right here. That's another 1 radian from here to here. I'm going to do that again. It takes me a little bit short of that 180 degrees. That would be another 1. And then to get to the 180 degrees, that little section right there is 0.14. 0.14. So when I look around the entire half of the circle, I have 1, 2, 3.14. Half a circle is 3.14 radians. And you probably recognize the number 3.14. 3.14 you guys know as pi. Now, if you go around the entire circle, that same thing happens. You have another 1, 2, 3, and 0.4. Another 1, another 1, another 0.14. And so if you total up the entire circle, you get double that 3.14, which is 6.28 radians, which gives you 2 pi. So to simplify this, if you're traveling around a circle, just like we had at the beginning, you'd start off with 0, go all the way around to pi, and all the way back around to 2 pi, just like we would do with our 0, 180, and 360. Okay, on the back side, we're going to convert from one of these to the other. So we're going to convert from degrees to radians and then radians to degrees, almost like you would do from inches to centimeters. All right, so to convert degrees to radians, you're going to multiply by pi over 180. So we'll take our 60 degrees. I'll multiply that by pi over 180. Notice how I put the 1 underneath, and just like the way that looks with two fractions. You're going to multiply across the top and across the bottom, giving you 60 pi over 180. Now, it's important that you don't multiply the pi out. Don't type pi into your calculator. You're just going to leave the pi alone. So what you could do, you can either reduce 60 over 180, or you could take 60, and I'm going to pull up the calculator for this part. You can do 60 divided by 180. It'll get you a decimal. We don't want decimals. We want fractions. So you're going to hit the button on the left called Math. Under the blue, under the green, right here it says Math. And the first thing that pops up is 1 arrow frac. That means change it to a fraction. So hit Enter and hit Enter again, and it'll give you a fraction of 1/3. So when I divide 60 by 180, I get 1/3. And since I already have a pi at the top, I don't really want to write 1 pi. 1 pi is kind of like 1x. I can just leave it off. So pi over 3. So again, those buttons were Math, and then the little arrow that had me change it to a fraction. All right, let's practice a few more. Put that over 1, multiply by pi over 180. 200 pi over 180. And again, don't type pi into the calculator. Do 200 divided by 180. 200 divided by 180. Math. Enter. Enter. 10 over 9. 10 over 9. So we'll write it as 10 pi over 9. You want to make sure that your radians have a pi in it whenever possible. So that's why you don't want to multiply that pi in as 3.14. Just leave it as pi. Multiply by pi over 180. The negative doesn't change anything. You would just leave the negative out in front. And one thing to note, if you don't have your calculator handy, no worries, you can still do this. You're just going to reduce the fraction 150 over 180. An easy way to do that, if it ends in 0, I know 10 can be divided by it. So I can just kind of shorten it down to this. This is only if you don't have your calculator. And then you could reduce 15 and 18. You could divide each of those by 3, which would then get you negative 5 over 6. Negative 5 pi over 6. Same answer as if you had your calculator and did 150 divided by 180. Math, enter, enter. 5 over 6. Example number 4. 23 pi over 180. Use my calculator for this one. 23 over 180. Enter. And then math, change it to a fraction. And it gives me 23 over 180. That means that the fraction cannot be reduced. And my final answer will just be 23 pi over 180. So sometimes they can't be reduced. Okay, so now we're going to go the opposite direction and convert from radians to degrees. And And we're going to have the exact opposite thing happen. We're going to want to multiply by 180 over pi. So you're going to multiply by 180 over pi. And the pi's are going to cancel, leaving you 180 over 60. And then you could just divide that out in your calculator. 180 divided by 60. It's not going to get you a fraction. It's going to get you just a whole number. Sorry, 180 over 6. My bad. 180 over 6 gets you 30 degrees. Wrote 60, I meant 6. Sorry about that. 30 degrees. All right, let's look at example number 6. Multiply by 180 over pi. The pi's cancel, so that 3 stays there, but the pi cancels with it. And then you're going to multiply 3 times 180 over 4. So 3 times 180 over 4. In your calculator, 3 times 180, and you could hit enter if you'd like, and then divide it by 4. That's what I usually do. 135 degrees. 135 degrees. All right, you're going to multiply again by 180 over pi. Pi's cancel. You have 8 times 180 over 9. If you wanted to do this by hand, you would just start kind of canceling some things out. So 9 and 180, both of those can be divisible by 9. So you can kind of reduce it that way if you needed to. Otherwise, type it straight into your calculator. 8 times 180. And you could even hit divide it by 9 right there. 160 degrees. 160 degrees. $180 over pi. Cancel the pi's. 55 times 180 and divide that by 36. When you type that into your calculator, it gets you 275 degrees. 275 degrees. The last two, example 9, this one is a negative. Again, that doesn't really affect anything. Just make sure that you keep the negative as you complete the problem. The pi's can cancel, and then you have negative 180 over 4. When you divide that, you get 45. Make sure you include the negative as part of your final answer, negative 45. And then our last one, example 10, 180 over pi. Cancel the pi's. 13 times 180 over 5. 13 times 180 divided by 5 gets me 468 degrees. That's over 360. That's okay. Just like we had negatives, we could also have numbers larger than 360. It just means that the person continued to move around the circle past the starting point. 468 degrees.